from Renaissance-style chateaux, grand country estates, architectural glass masterpieces.
These are the remarkable homes
My goodness.
and magnificent landmarks
One day, my son, all this will be yours.
at the very heart of Britain's spectacular history.
Oh, this is stepping back in time.
Join me and a host of celebrities
I can't believe people lived here.
with a passion for the past
It really is a little hidden treasure, isn't it?
as we travel the length and breadth of the nation
This is really exciting.
with unparalleled behind-the-scenes access.
Would you like to see some of his speeches that I brought from the archive in
No,
Cambridge?
not yes. From the highest heights, there's a heck of a view from up here, to the deepest depths. We've got stalactites here.
We'll uncover the secrets
Here he is.
Oh,
still hidden within these breathtaking buildings.
it's good job I'm slim. These are the places that nobody else gets to see.
And explore the riches
It's so big, it's so intricate, it's so beautiful.
and treasures of one of our most loved institutions. Welcome to the secrets of the National Trust. Kedleston Hall in Derbyshire has been the seat of the Curzon family since the 12th century.
But it wasn't until 1758, after Sir Nathaniel Curzon inherited the estate, that it was transformed into the neoclassical triumph we see today.
With an innovative architect and no expense spared, Sir Nathaniel Curzon was able to realise his ambition.
A temple of the arts that captures the obsession with ancient Rome to stunning effect.
More than 100 years later, this breathtaking mansion would prove a fitting home for a confident young heir who grew up to be the most well-known of all the Curzons.
George Nathaniel Curzon had a glittering career which saw him become Viceroy of India, the most powerful man in the British Raj.
His was a lifetime filled with colonial ambition, deep controversy,
Pioneering conservation, great love and great loss.
These very different men left a lasting impression on Kedleston Hall
Where are we?
by uncovering illusions hidden in the walls,
It's almost as though you're eavesdropping on a ball that was going on 200 years ago.
dusting off rarely seen photo albums,
Oh my goodness, that's Curzon up there.
That's Lord and Lady Curzon.
and wrestling the dark contradictions of the empire.
As a quasi-king ruling over a country, a fiendishly difficult role to get right.
I'll tell the story of two Curzons, one famed for his architectural vision and the other for his all-conquering colonial rule. Also tonight, Shappi Khorsandi reveals the American debutante who became the lady of Kedleston Hall,
This is a proper love story.
It was a total love story.
and Peter Purvis visits a national treasure that's only here today because of Lord Curzon's remarkable foresight.
I feel very privileged to have seen this.
But first, I'm being welcomed by the Trust's Joe Watkinson,
Hello, Joe.
who's introducing me to the full splendour of Kedleston Hall.
Joe, I have been in some entrance halls. I have never seen anything like this. Astonishing.
Right where we are now is we're in the heart of Kedleston. We're actually in the central axis of the whole building.
You can see the depth of the entire place.
And this is where Nathaniel Curzon would have welcomed his guests into the hall to give them the real wow factor.
Dominated by 20 huge Corinthian columns, The marble hall is 67 feet long, with a towering 40-foot-high ceiling.
It's a bit like stepping into ancient Rome.
When Nathaniel Curzon inherited Kedleston and the title, he decided to really make his mark, and so he moved the village of Kedleston right out the way, but he left the church and he created in that place what you see here today.
To create his ultimate dream home, Nathaniel turned to Robert Adam, the highly sought-after architect at the forefront of the classical revival movement.
So it's an Adam building then?
Absolutely, his mark is everywhere you look.
And did Curzon know Rome? He'd been there?
Nathaniel Curzon hadn't actually been to Rome, but Robert Adam did, and he came back so inspired and so enthused about everything he saw from the temples and the villas.
So Adam sold Curzon this idea from his drawings?
Just from his drawings, and that's how important they are, and we've got one especially for you right here to have a look at, an original Robert Adam drawing.
That's a bit of a rarity, isn't it?
They're not on display, these, but we've got them out for you today to have a look at. Let's have a look. So this is a concept drawing for the floor that we're standing on now.
What's the significance of that central pattern? It looks familiar.
So Kedleston's full of these classical references, and this is actually a honeysuckle flower, which is a really...
That's why I know what it is.
Yes, I
It's
do.
honeysuckle, yeah. Wonderful.
We know that Nathaniel Curzon had a great ambition and deep pockets, and so was willing to pay for the best quality materials, the best quality craftsmanship.
Well, he got it, didn't he?
Laid in the 1760s, the floor contains local stone inlaid with the finest Italian marble.
Oh, look at that.
This is the south front of Kedleston, in a complete contrast to the Palladian architectural style at the time. This was all about introducing this new style, which was about Neoclassicism. So it was really all about movement. So you've got lots of these recesses and the curved staircase down here, and this was a classic Robert Adam. It's not exactly what we see today, so you can see it's got south front of Kedleston House with the new additions, and actually these new additions didn't take place.
Well, there's still chance. Go on, go for it.
Once Nathaniel's guests had been wowed by the marble hall and swept their way over the glorious marble floor, they'd be met with yet more wonder in the adjoining saloon.
It's another temple to the gods.
It is indeed. So the Saloon was inspired by the Pantheon in Rome, which is the most referenced classical building.
It's incredible.
The Pantheon has been described as the eighth wonder of the ancient world. Built almost 2,000 years ago, this stunning domed building clearly made a huge impression on Robert Adam, who recreated it for Nathaniel Curzon here at Kedleston Hall in the heart of Derbyshire.
This room was used as a ballroom, so you would have had lots of dances and your guests would be entertained.
I can see them whirring round in these wonderful frocks and great crinolines. What a wonderful place to entertain. And is it absolutely like the Pantheon?
Not quite, and we can reveal why. So if you want to follow me, we'll show you.
The magnificence of Kedleston Hall, both inside and out, is Nathaniel Curzon's enduring legacy. Joe's sent me high into the rafters to meet building surveyor Giles Warhurst to find out the hidden lengths Curzon went to recreate ancient Rome in Derbyshire.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
You must be Giles.
Yes, that's right. Hello, Alan.
I love the waistcoat.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
As befits Kedleston Hall. Where are we?
So at the moment, we're above the saloon.
Right above the saloon?
Absolutely. What we have here at Kedleston is the dome that you've seen on the roof, which is quite a shallow dome. And then inside, the dome that you see from the saloon
is this one here. This is a heck of a construction.
It is, yeah. Like, it creates this void that we're now standing inside.
And it's lasted getting on for 250 years.
Exactly.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it, really?
The craftsmanship and manpower it would have taken to create this structure takes your breath away. And just one layer down, the secret behind all that effort is revealed.
So what can we see here?
And if, that cover comes off, and if you stand on tiptoe, you get the view through to the saloon.
You too. It's almost as though you're eavesdropping on a ball that was going on 200 years ago.
It's one of the privileges of getting access to a space like this.
This really is a secret of the National Trust, isn't it?
Astonishing Kedleston Hall in Derbyshire has been the seat of the aristocratic Curzon family since the 12th century.
Inspired by the architecture and classical antiquities of ancient Rome, it was Sir Nathaniel Curzon who built this 18th century marvel.
An extravagant temple of the arts that's also an amazing space for entertaining.
And it was a fitting palace to be passed down some 4 generations later to the most well-known member of the Curzon family.
George Nathaniel Curzon grew up at Kedleston. At the end of the 19th century, he rose to become the Viceroy of India, one of the most powerful yet controversial figures in the world. I'm heading to the drawing room with writer Mark Allam to find out more about the man who was to become Kedleston Hall's most famous resident.
If you're going to have a drawing room like this. If it doesn't move, gild it.
Absolutely. It really is spectacular. This is the showstopper drawing room, isn't it?
So, was George Nathaniel Curzon born at Kedleston?
He was, yes.
I gather he always wanted to be Viceroy of India, which is a strange thing to grow up wanting to be. There's only one of them, but why so?
Well, I think, you know, he came from a part of society that was conditioned to be expected to attain office, perhaps.
So here he is, as a young man. He does look aristocratic.
Absolutely. You can see he's a man of stature already, you know, often criticised for being ambitious.
Was it mistaken at times for arrogance and conceit?
Absolutely. His peers, his contemporaries, weren't always happy with the way he behaved. And one friend at Oxford penned this poem about him.
My name is George Nathaniel Curzon. I am a most superior person. My cheek is pink, my hair is sleek. I dine at Blenheim once a week. It's a good boast, isn't it?
It kind of almost sums him up, really, in a way.
He became, arguably, the second most powerful person probably in the world. Second only to the king is George Nathaniel Curzon.
Absolutely.
He could only have done it because he was a most superior person.
Curzon was Viceroy from 1899 to 1905, which put him at the head of the British administration in India on behalf of the Crown. Dedicated to the idea of the empire, his time as Viceroy was marked by controversy. He was heavily criticised for his casual attitude to the widespread famine in 1899, in which millions of people died. And his decision in 1905 to partition Bengal spurred protests and radical nationalism throughout India. I'm heading to a secret storeroom full of rarely seen items, where Mark is going to tell me more about Curzon's career as Viceroy.
Isn't it great to get into the bowels of the house, so to speak? Yeah.
When you look at the role of Viceroy as a quasi-king out there ruling over a country, part of an empire, a fiendishly difficult role to get right. But did he have respect for Indian culture?
Absolutely. He expended a lot of time and energy helping to maintain and restore Indian buildings, and particularly the Taj Mahal.
Curzon considered the Taj Mahal exquisite. As Viceroy, he ensured its preservation by signing an act to protect it and other ancient monuments throughout India.
He was absolutely supremely interested in Indian heritage, and he's left a valuable legacy in terms of the conservation of Indian heritage as well.
Everywhere you look, you're reminded of India.
That's a driving seat.
What, for an elephant?
Yeah, absolutely spectacular, very delicate.
Yeah.
This is an Indian elephant headdress.
Lady Curzon, 1899.
That is the magic date that Lord Curzon became Viceroy of India. And this is something that, again, people don't get to see. And
It looks like tinsel.
It does, and that's essentially what it is.
And a chandelier.
This is a silver chandelier. We can see the arms of the family at the top. This is made from items that he was gifted in India.
So, he comes home with all his gifts from India and he melts them down.
Whether you see that as a good or a bad thing is debatable.
The British Crown ruled India for almost 90 years and left behind a complicated legacy. Hundreds of thousands of Brits made a home in India during the time of the Raj. A famous Indian expat and contemporary of Curzon was world-renowned writer Rudyard Kipling. He was born in India and grew up with the same pro-empire British sense of entitlement as that of the Viceroy. Joan Bakewell has travelled to his eventual home in East Sussex to discover more about one of our best-known and often controversial writers.
This 17th century house was the residence of one of Britain's most celebrated authors, whose work, I can say without doubt, touched my childhood, and probably yours too. Originally born in India in 1865, Rudyard Kipling came to call Bateman's his home for over 34 years. It became a place of solace, an escape from his incredible success and the moments of immense tragedy that befell him and his family. To tell me more about this complex man and his fascinating life, the Trust's Gary Enstone has invited me to Kipling's literary retreat. Now, Gary, I know that this room contains several clues as to Kipling's childhood in India. So where are they?
Well, you've got to look closely, but they're all spread around the room. Got all these bits of glittering copper and brass. You've got various gods and idols here in the cupboards. It's completely full of various little trinkets and memorabilia.
Now, how important were those Indian childhood days? He must have remembered it with great affection.
Tremendously. Really influenced him. His father really believed that his young children should enjoy being in India and actually experience the real India. And they also had an Indian nanny, and it's said by the age of 6, actually, Kipling could speak better Hindi than he could English.
I'm not surprised he loved India. Where next?
So let's go upstairs to the study and see where he wrote.
Roger's love of India never left him, and after attending boarding school in England, he went back for a further 7 years. He cut his teeth writing short stories for British Indian publications, and when he finally returned home, it was to literary acclaim.
Right, so here's the Kipling study. This is where he did all his great work.
It's wonderful. And yet the whole point of the room is the table.
If you come and have a look at it up close, you can see how much of a working tool it is by how cluttered it is and how much
certainly is, yeah.
pieces all over, but also, if you look really closely, how many ink stains there are.
Oh, it's a terrible mess, isn't it? Everyone knows Kipling because of the Jungle Book.
Yes, and here's a beautiful edition that we've got here in our collection.
So here it is, Mowgli. A man-trained boy would have been badly bruised, for the fall was a good 15 feet. But Mowgli fell as Baloo had taught him to fall and landed on his feet. Wonderful. The Jungle Book was first published in 1894 and was an instant hit. Kipling's stories are clearly influenced by his childhood in India, and many have been interpreted as reflecting his belief in Britain's moral right to rule it. As well as being a base for his substantial literary output, Bateman's was also a loving family home. Kipling and his wife Carrie had 3 children, but their happiness was to be shattered by a devastating personal tragedy. I'm being given a behind-the-scenes look at a very special archive here at Bateman's. Now, this is Rudyard Kipling and his wife Carrie with their firstborn, Josephine.
Yes.
So this is a great moment in a family's life, and he adored her.
He really did. Josephine was very much the apple of his eye. He really wanted to write words and stories for her. So the Just So stories were a set of stories he wrote about, how the elephant got its trunk and how the leopard got its spots for Josephine.
And here she is, aged 6, just before disaster struck.
Yeah, completely out of the blue. They were travelling to America. She caught pneumonia, she caught whooping cough on top of that, and then died quite suddenly. And Rudyard's work and his life was never the same from that day forward.
And it's not the only tragedy in their life, because tragedy hits their son, John.
John was desperate to join the war effort in 1914. Having been rejected by the Navy and the Army due to ill health, Kipling exerted his influence.
The son of the hero of the empire is not doing his bit. You know, that was sort of the terminology that was going around. And that built up on John, and John felt he needed to do his bit. Rudyard helped him do that.
And then he was killed very early in the war.
Yeah, so 1915 at the Battle of Loos, the first action that John saw, he went missing, never to be seen again.
The stories that you tell are so intimate and so authentic. It's hard to put that against the sort of populist legacy that he was just an old colonial imperialist.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is, you know, like any individual, you know, he had views in the 1890s and the 1900s and 1910. Yes, he was very imperialist in his early years, but by later years he became much, much more liberal and much more open to new ideas and new ways.
Kipling remained at Bateman's for the rest of his life. He never returned to the place of his birth, though his time in India is reflected in his most famous works.
The life of Rudyard Kipling was truly outstanding. He was a fated star of literature and a father facing overwhelming tragedy. Bateman's was his escape. It was his way out from what must have been a thrilling and turbulent life. It was his home.
Kipling and Curzon had a shared love of India, but they also both had an unquestioning belief in the British right to rule. And Kedleston is full of powerful reminders of Curzon's time as Viceroy when he oversaw the British Raj. Kedleston Hall in Derbyshire, a remarkable neoclassical mansion, home to the Curzon family.
It's quite spectacular, isn't it?
And some. And the most famous Curzon of all was George Nathaniel, who became Viceroy of India at the height of the British Empire.
As Viceroy, his rule was split between controversy and accomplishment, and this theme extended even into his hobbies. I'm back with writer Mark Allum in Kedleston's Trophy Corridor to find out more.
If you want to know what George Curzon's hobby was, you've only to look in this hall.
Absolutely. We've got an Indian water buffalo here, and, you know, these are creatures that Curzon almost certainly would have shot.
To us nowadays, this is just wholesale slaughter.
It is, but we cannot apply modern standards to what was happening in those days. When Curzon was out in India, the shikar, the hunt, the big Indian hunt, was the thing to do. Essentially, that would be a hunt that could last days, even weeks, with thousands of people, hundreds of beaters, flushing the animals out.
And hundreds of animals being killed.
Yeah, absolutely, literally hundreds and hundreds.
Did it not occur to them that there wasn't a limitless supply of wildlife and big game?
Well, I think it did, and the penny eventually started to drop, and it was largely due to Lady Curzon that actually happened. Apparently, and by all accounts, they were out, and they were looking for the fabled Indian one-horned rhino. They didn't see any. All they saw were footprints in the mud. And it was at that point that Lady Curzon said to Lord Curzon, apparently, that they needed to do something about it. And her influence over him led to the institution of the Kaziranga Game Reserve.
The Kaziranga National Park was established in 1908 and now covers 430 square kilometres. It's home to Bengal tigers, elephants, and well over 2,000 one-horned rhinos, 2/3 of the world's population.
That park now is part of Curzon's legacy, his conservation legacy, despite the fact he actually killed so many animals. In the end, he was actually responsible for starting to save some of them as well.
It's one of those strange twists of fate, isn't it? That this led eventually to the formation of one of the world's first nature reserves. And it just points up the contradictions in Curzon's character.
The climax of Curzon's time as Viceroy came with the Delhi Durbar, a 2-week festival held in 1903 to celebrate the accession of Edward VII. This spectacle was a display of British power presided over by Curzon himself. Mark is giving me access to a rarely opened photo album that offers a unique insight into this incredible celebration.
Mark, the Delhi Durbar sounds the most astonishing spectacle.
It was an extraordinary event. It literally surpassed anything that had really ever happened before.
What was a Durbar?
Well, essentially, it was a coronation event. In 1877, the Durbar for Queen Victoria, when she was declared Empress of India, was an enormous event. But this event, organised by Curzon, was for Edward VII, who didn't attend. He sent his brother, the Duke of Connaught. But what we're able to look at is this album here.
Coronation Durbar, Delhi 1903, of His Majesty King Edward VII, Viceroy, Baron Curzon of Kedleston.
Although the Duke of Connaught was standing in for the king, it was really Curzon who was holding court here. I think it might be safe to say that this has not been opened many times since 1903. There's the king himself.
And here is Curzon.
In his finery, looking pretty spectacular.
The very superior person.
Absolutely.
Oh, look, now we get to all the Indian titles and potentates. His Highness the Nizam of Hyderabad. Wonderful.
Every important person listed with a photograph.
Every page is wonderful.
Look at this, the city of tents, the Bengal camp. Thousands and thousands of people, thousands of troops.
It is, it's a city of tents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, my goodness. And don't arrive in a carriage and pair, come on an elephant. And that's Curzon up there.
That's Curzon, that's Lord and Lady Curzon.
I know this sounds silly. That is a very big elephant. They are a long way up. It's not sort of here, it's sort of up there.
They do seem to be, I have to say. This was such a huge and extravagant event. The cost was absolutely enormous. And all of those Indian princes and maharajas that turned up in all of their finery on elephants. There must have been more jewels at the Delhi Durbar than had ever been assembled in the world in one place at one time. This is conspicuous consumption, really, and it's a display of status as well. The people that were attending were made to feel very important. They were important, but they felt even more important by being invited.
Was it regarded as a success for Curzon?
It was an enormous success for Curzon. It was literally the height of everything he achieved in India. It epitomised the glory of the empire and the way Curzon went about organising that.
And the power of the man.
The Delhi Durbar culminated in the pomp and ceremony of the state ball. Only the highest-ranking guests were invited. But it was Lady Curzon who stole the show and enraptured the world's press. Shappi Khorsandi has joined me at Kedleston Hall to learn more about the American-born Mary and her spectacular rise to Vicereine of India.
Intelligent, glamorous and beautiful, Mary Curzon came a long way from her Chicago roots to become the Lady of Kedleston Hall. And how she did makes for a fascinating tale.
Mary was one of a number of young women who made their way to England in the late 19th and early 20th century. But these rich heiresses were not here on vacation.
Wow, that's incredible, isn't it?
Isn't it wonderful? In the peacock dress.
So beautiful.
Author Anne de Courcy is an expert on these so-called dollar princesses who crossed the Atlantic on a mission to gatecrash British high society.
So what is a dollar princess?
They were the American girls who came over loaded with money, usually very beautiful, and they scooped up most of the elder sons of the British aristocracy. Mary was brought up in Washington. Her mother moved the family there thinking they'd have more of a social life. Mary came out there at 18. Well, her stunning beauty, you can see how lovely she is with her perfect oval face, her grey eyes, and she took Washington by storm. And then she thought, what's next? England.
Upon her arrival in 1894, the young Mary made quite the splash, and she had no shortage of suitors. In this period, many of England's aristocrats were on their uppers, land rich but cash poor, so Mary's beauty and money made her a prized asset. But she only had eyes for Lord Curzon.
She met him at the Duchess of Westminster's ball. Then they were on a weekend house party together, and that's where she fell in love with him.
Wow, so this is a proper love story.
It was a total love story.
Mary married George Curzon in 1895. 4 years later, her husband became the Viceroy of India. Mary, as his vicereine, had now become one of the most powerful and influential women in the British Empire. And it was in Delhi, at the famous Durbar Ball, where Mary would announce her arrival on the political stage, wearing a dress that would ensure she was the main attraction. Dr. Nicola Thomas, an authority on Lady Curzon, has promised to tell me more.
Hello, Nicola, and wow, so this is the famous peacock dress.
It's stunning, isn't it?
The dress may look pretty sturdy, but it dates back to 1902, so it's incredibly delicate. The chance to get this close is a rare treat.
Oh my goodness, it's so incredibly shimmery and shiny, and
So it's haute couture. This was the most fashionable dress of its time. The cloth was made in India, and you can see the gold and silver and copper threadwork created this idea of the peacock feathers, and each of the feathers has got a beetle wing, creating that little bit of extra shimmer.
it's certainly a dress that oozes colonial power. Is that a part of the statement that she wanted to make?
Oh yes, this was a symbolic dress designed for a very particular occasion where she wanted to assert dominance.
Mary's spectacular dress was headline news.
Ah, and here she is on the front page.
This type of photograph became the iconic image of Mary Curzon. And then this is a full spread in the Illustrated London News of the actual event. And we've got Mary Curzon here.
In her dress.
In her dress.
And her legacy wasn't just dresses. What other impact did she have?
She was probably best known for starting one of the big nursing hospitals and also kind of like a fund to support women's health in India.
Mary's amazing journey from America's New World to the traditions of the British would leave a lasting legacy.
Along the way, she became a style icon with her exquisite peacock dress, which became an everlasting symbol of her spectacular life.
Both Lord and Lady Curzon's time in India left an indelible impression, one that befitted their power and status at the forefront of the British Empire. Kedleston Hall in Derbyshire, the grand home of George Nathaniel Curzon, who, at the turn of the 20th century, was Viceroy of India. But his reign came to an abrupt end in 1905. Following a bitter dispute over the organisation of the Indian Army, he returned to England under a black cloud.
And disappointment turned to tragedy just a year later, with the death of his wife Mary. She was just 36 years old.
Following the death of his beloved wife from heart failure, Curzon found solace in continuing the conservation work that he'd begun famously with the Taj Mahal in India.
Curzon concentrated on restoring and rebuilding his beloved Kedleston, as well as protecting threatened historic buildings throughout Britain.
Peter Purvis is in Lincolnshire to see a 15th century castle, a building fortunate to benefit from the Curzon touch.
At the turn of the 20th century, this incredible medieval building was stumbling into rack and ruin, until dramatic intervention saved not only Tattershall Castle, but also changed the course of historic preservation in this country forever. Incorporating an earlier stone castle, Tattershall was built in brick by Lord Ralph Cromwell in the 15th century in an effort to show off his wealth, status and power. Tattershall's manager, Paul Robinson, has agreed to unlock the secrets of its history for me. Paul, it's a phenomenal-looking castle. Tell me a bit about it.
During the Civil War in 1643, the castle was knocked about a bit and then it was in ruin for over 200 years.
I can't believe that they just left it to rot. At the start of the 20th century, the castle was sold to an American consortium and threatened with being dismantled brick by brick. But at the last hour, on the 28th of October 1911, Lord Curzon stepped in ready to flex his considerable financial muscle.
He had a quick wander around and bought the castle there and then by telegram. It was saved.
Wow. Having bought the castle, Lord Curzon then devoted an incredible amount of time and effort to bringing it back to its former glory. The tower is 5 stories high, each housing a spacious chamber such as this ground floor parlour room. Oh my word, what an extraordinary space. Lord Curzon went to remarkable lengths to recover the original medieval fireplaces which had been hacked out prior to his purchase.
Eventually they were found on Tilbury docks waiting to be shipped to America, and he paid almost twice as much as he did for the entire castle for those 4 fireplaces.
It's quite extraordinary. Why were they so important?
Because they contain all the heraldic symbols of Lord Cromwell's family. This is Lord Cromwell's personal symbol. It's the treasurer's purse. It also has his motto on there, N'ai-je droit? Have I not the right? Which shows us he's quite a pompous individual.
I'm getting a rare look at Lord Curzon's own photograph album, which contains pictures of the castle's restoration back in 1912.
Not a lot of people get to see this, so I thought give you a special glimpse.
Oh, fascinating, yes, let's have a look.
You can see photographs of the castle in ruin. The floors had totally collapsed, gone.
Oh, there's nothing there at all. Lord Curzon spent around £2 million in today's money on his transformation of Tattershall. Is this it at the end?
Yes, so this is when the castle opened to the public.
Success. I feel very privileged to have seen this. Conserving this ancient castle fueled Lord Curzon's passion for preservation. I understand about Tattershall, but why is Lord Curzon so revered in terms of restoration?
He's really known for helping to change the law. He gave some brilliant speeches in the House of Lords, which helped to pass the 1913 Ancient Monument Consolidation and Amendment Act, which is the basis for all of our heritage laws today.
A brilliant man, eh? Without his tireless work to save Britain's historic architecture, I wouldn't be standing here today. Lord Curzon was responsible not only for protecting Tattershall Castle, he also fought to protect all our ancient heritage buildings, a legacy that remains and rewards all of us to this day.
Lord Curzon's custodianship of historic buildings is still best exemplified here at Kedleston Hall, his home throughout his life. Curzon died in 1925 and was laid to rest here, joining his wife Mary in the elaborate tomb he'd designed in the medieval All Saints' Church, which, like the Curzon family, has been here since the 12th century.
It seems only right, then, that I should help raise the flag that represents this ancient bloodline.
This weather-beaten specimen needs to be replaced, so I'm heading up to the roof to meet building surveyor Giles Warhurst once again to do the honours.
Gentlemen, hello.
But since we're over 40 feet above the Derbyshire countryside...
Do you want to hold your back, Giles?
It's safety first.
Yeah, I'm in.
We make our way to the flagpole which stands proudly right on the edge of Kedleston's glorious north front.
There's a heck of a view from up here.
It is, isn't it?
So this hasn't been untwined for 4 years?
Roughly 4 years, yeah, something like that.
Look at this poor old thing.
Well, it's 4 years up in the wind, does for you.
Oh, right, got it. So that one's on. You got the old one off.
Yeah.
So what's on this flag, Giles?
So this flag shows the Curzon family crest. 3 parrots or popinjays shown on there.
So popinjay's a parrot?
Yeah.
Right. OK, flag. You're going up. You're going to be up there for 3 or 4 years, so good luck. Gosh, well, it's nice to have had a small part in 800 years of Curzon history. This magnificent house here in Derbyshire is a striking tribute to an ancient family name.
It was built by Nathaniel Curzon to spectacularly emulate a Roman temple fit for the gods. Then, 100 years later, became home to George Nathaniel Curzon, the most famous of all, who rose to become Viceroy of India at the height of the British Empire.
Kedleston Hall is their palace and a spectacular symbol of ambition, power and resolve.
Next time, I'm at Ham House in London, an estate caught in the chaos of civil war.
It's impossible to overestimate just how dangerous life would have been.
A hotbed of passion and intrigue.
So she charmed the Lord Protector.
There were all sorts of rumours that they had an affair.
With supernatural goings-on.
Oh, my goodness. She's not the only ghost here, then?
Oh, by no means.
And Oz Clarke uncovers a house that saved the king.
He was the most wanted man in the country.